Bootlegs are getting to be a bigger and bigger issue. This isn't something new. This has been around for 15, 20 years. As soon as unlicensed providers realized that they could use slave labor to make 1-cent items and sell them to people for the same amount of money that you would sell something that people really got paid to work on, it skyrocketed. And that's one of my really big concerns about bootlegs too, because every time we buy them, you don't know what the conditions are like in the factories where they're produced. Because a lot of those factories are in other countries which do not have specific regulations as far as like OSHA, health and safety standards, because some of those are produced in other countries that have totalitarian regimes where, like my friend Jack, who's from China, he spoke against the government and he was locked up for 10 years in forced labor to produce items for 10 years of his life because he needed to be re-educated. Every time we buy bootleg, we're not actually supporting end workers who are poor little hardworking guys that are getting a salary and up and coming in another country. We're supporting people who may very well be using slave labor.
So a bootleg is not necessarily made in some guy's parents' basement. It's actually made like a little sweatshop.
There can be a full industry behind any item that you see.
I've seen sites online that sell very little except bootlegs. You're buying these Hong Kong knockoffs for like $7 for an entire 50-episode series that are costing you maybe $50, $60 in America. And I've heard from a lot of fans that, it's like anime's too expensive, I don't want to spend this much. Well, they don't seem to realize, the reason it's expensive, it's a niche market, we are selling less, but at the same time, if you're supporting it, buying it for like $10 or whatever, what studio is going to want to spend the money to bring it over to America?
That's very true.
To put it out.
There's
That's still an insight because here I almost been tempted to rationalize here, like maybe for instance the old school space battleship Yamato, which sadly is not, hopefully yet, I pray it will be, not released unedited, and subtitled. There is the option of bootleg and also go ahead and buy in the domestic sublators, but that's still contributing to the.
It's still contributing to the problem, and you're actually touching on the edge of something, fan subs, which I'll get to a little bit later.
Okay.
When you say, it's not just one person in their basement, it's not. There can be a full industry. There could be a town council somewhere in a country that has their people working with really toxic chemicals and things to create items that are not up to the standards of the normal industry. Part of the reason that things can cost an awful lot less is because they're made with much cheaper goods, they're made with unsafe practices, they're made with toxic chemicals, they're made with any number of things that not only harm the people that are making them, but can harm the people that are buying them. I really do wish I had my sample box with me, because one of the things I really have to laugh about are a couple of Sailor Moon style banks that I have. And the reason that I call them Sailor Moon style banks is because they are in completely the wrong outfits. They have, one of them has a purple skirt. One of them is dressed like Sailor Mercury but has this haircut of Sailor Saturn, and so on and so forth. And it's obvious this did not come from the company that produced this anime. I let them sit in the sun for a year. One of them is now completely covered with a mottled body mold all over it that appears to have risen out of the inside of this plastic. The plastic is bad enough quality that something is living inside of it and is seeping out. This is a very visible cue of something that is definitely unhealthy to have around. I keep the stuff in the box so I'm not breathing near it during the year. But what about the ones that aren't such a visual cue? What about her neighbor that hasn't gotten covered with mold yet, but may very well be leaching any kind of toxic chemical substance out of it when it's near me? I have no way of knowing because I don't have $10,000 fancy meters to read this and see what they really are. But I can tell from the one on this side that there's definitely a problem. I have some keychains that look like they are pretty perfect items if you skim over them, and then you realize that like Goku's wearing a bright red gi, and as I started looking at them, I realized they bend back and forth. And when they bend back and forth, the gold that covers them is flaking and peeling off in strips. Not only is it just a large physical hazard because they're very sharp strips, but I don't know what that metal is that's underneath it. And you can have a lot of discussions about how that metal got into that country. It may well have come from us because the U.S. has a habit of dumping its bad metals in other countries and a lot of its other waste in other countries. We're buying it back when we buy bootlegs.
Well, you can go to like a Dollar Tree and some of those places. One time we found a Devastator transformer for like $5 at Family Dollar, and you could tell it wasn't the actual G1 figure or anything like that, but it was hilarious.
Yes. Discount stores. Sometimes discount stores will discount because they buy a large amount of materials from stores that have gone out of business. They'll buy it at 10 cents on the dollar and they'll sell it at 20 cents on the dollar. But discount stores can also get things from some very negative sources, including overseas sources. And in fact, I found some items in Target and Wal-Mart that were very definitely bootleg items. Aside from the toxic chemical issue, there's the whole issue of, all right, how many people did you just pay to keep slaves to work on this? Did you have another question?
I forgot.
Okay. And you actually bring up a good point talking about Dollar Tree, because sometimes we think, all right, I'm not going to run into bootlegs in a decent venue. I'm not going to run into bootlegs in Target. I'm going to trust where I'm going to buy things. And it's amazing how many places they can show up because they're produced in such quantity and unloaded through so many different avenues. It's a spiderweb chain of support for this industry that can reach fingers into almost any location. Even our dealer's room. I would say be careful because our staff are checking. They're doing their best to try and find anything that's bad. But keep an eye out just to be sure because we don't know if when they go by, if there might be a dealer somewhere that pulls something out afterward. And that dealer may not have thought through all of this. It's not that the dealer's purposely trying to kill you with the moldy Sailor Saturn, but the dealer figures that's the best way they're going to make their living by passing off stuff that they get really cheap for more money. Not ethical either. They may not be trying to kill you, but even a motivation like that is enough to let something like this into any local venue.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you said. Like again, you would never think a national chain such as Walmart. But if you think about it, because it kind of reminds me several years ago. This is probably, a different symptom of the same problem. It was talking about it was the post 9/11 deal, talking about examining some of these containers from that come in our ports, and so the problem is thousands upon thousands, if not millions of these are going through our ports every day. And they said, unfortunately, they, at least, the home security wise, they try and focus on just one part of the deal. That says if they focus on every single one, it would totally ruin world trade.
Yeah, if we're receiving how many millions of tons of items in a given time period, and we have 5 guys on the I'm going to check all this stuff squad for the government, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't get checked. It gets done on an audit basis where you pick a random amount, a random number. If you have something that flags you that there's a problem, you may come down on a certain importer. But the government does not have nearly enough employees working on this to be able to check everything that comes in. And as far as Walmart, they want to make a profit. And they may think that they're doing business with legitimate businessmen. They may be. That next chain may be doing business with someone that's not so legitimate.
Fortunately, we as the NDK consumers can.
Exactly, the consumers have a lot of power.
That's what we're here for.